Welcome to Tuesday Talks, and I am thrilled to have Dr. Leslie Kasanoff with us. Leslie has the most amazing experience, and I will let her introduce herself in a moment, but I'm thrilled to be speaking with her about debunking myths surrounding HRT. So thanks for talking with us today, Dr. Leslie.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, would you tell us a little bit about your background and why you're so passionate around debunking these myths? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this particular working with women who are either in menopause or postmenopause.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for asking. So here's the thing. When I was going through the whole perimenopause thing, let me back up just a sec.
Yeah.
I practiced as a holistic chiropractor for 25 years. And for 10 years before that, I was a medical lab scientist. So I kind of have this little bit of science geekiness in mixed in with, the holistic health thing, that's just who I am. And when I started going through the whole perimenopause thing, I was practicing chiropractic and like every other female in her 40s, had a whole slew of things in my life that was going on, when all this was happening, crazy teenage kids and blah 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 blah, and started having really horrendous symptoms, menopausal symptoms.
Like what? Tell us. Can you tell us
Well,
specifically?
the hot flashes, the night sweats, the not sleeping, the, can't keep a thought in my head without, forgetting why I walked into a room and what day it was. And it was pretty bad. The temper flares, just the whole 9 yards, ready to kill my kids at the drop of a hat over really dumb stuff. Um, and anyway, a colleague, a medical colleague suggested that I go on bioidentical hormone creams. And she says to me, they're safer than, I know your orientation is towards something more natural and they're supposed to be safer and blah, 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 blah. And so I just needed some relief. So I gave it a try. And literally in less than 2 months, I gained over 20 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I was frustrated to say the least. I mean, symptomatically they worked, but I mean, 20 pounds in 2 months, I was seeing myself, 200 pounds or more. I was like, no, this isn't going to work for me. I got to find something else.
Yeah. I mean, also to gain so much weight so quickly, also the health risk. So I thank you for that. And I have a couple of questions. So,
Sure.
um, chiropractic is really working with the body's own healing systems. And
Exactly.
so you spoke with a colleague in the medical field, and so you thought that bioidenticals would be more would be closer to the closest to the natural. And I'm curious, Leslie, and there's no judgment here, but I know for a lot of women, it's the first thing that they think about. They don't think about doing anything else. They're looking at it as a medical issue rather than a lifestyle issue. So I'm just curious from your perspective why that was the first thing that you tried. Was it because your life was so busy, because you didn't know anywhere else to go? Tell us about that.
So, yeah, it was all of the above. It was a chaotic time for me personally. I was running two chiropractic practices. I was trying to sell one of them. It was 2008. I had two teenage kids. I was in an always contentious marriage. It was just life. It's interesting how life throws these things at us during that time. And it was I was grasping at straws. And I think a lot of women can get that. It
Yeah.
was yeah, I think we all go through similar things at that point. And basically the information that's out there in the world is here, take this, it'll help you.
Exactly.
And and rather than taking a step back, which is what I ultimately ended up doing, and saying, okay, this didn't work for me. How do I balance my hormones in a more natural way?
Mhm.
And then and so I ended up doing some research
Okay,
and
can I pause
trying.
you right there? Can I pause you
Sure.
right there? Because I just want to back up a little bit, because your point is so well taken, and I speak with women every day and they are suffering. I mean, 10 hot flashes a night, getting up, having to change, multiple times a night. I mean, this is miserable, like not functioning. So it's totally understandable to
Yeah,
want a quick fix. But as we
sure.
know, just like with other treatments, if we're not looking at the underlying causes, the symptoms are just going to get pushed away. So I'm curious, now that you have, this is a specialty of yours, what was actually happening in your body to cause it to gain 20 pounds? You didn't have the hot flashes, you weren't as irritable, but what happened with the HRT to cause that?
I don't know that I can really answer that question. I know that that is one of the side effects, and it's interesting because they they, meaning the medical establishment, the pharmaceutical companies, they lead you to believe that the symptoms should be less with the bioidenticals. But here's the truth of the matter. They never really studied that systematically to be able to make that claim.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And basically all you're doing is you're giving your body the hormones that it's not producing on its own. Well, one of the side effects, as we know, of estrogen is that estrogen helps you lay down fat. Estrogen prepares the body to deliver a baby and make breast milk and, do all those other things that it needs to do when you're pregnant.
I have
So,
Yeah, thank you. And I have another question before we get into the research and debunking some of the myths. Like menopause, perimenopause, and menopause, like the change in the hormones is natural. Like our body is stopping producing the hormones. So when we replace the hormones to ease the symptoms, it's not really treating why there's such an imbalance as we're going through the process. Can you speak to that,
exactly.
please?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail right on the head there, because what my approach has been since I worked through it and since I'm working with other women with it, what my approach has been is more about balancing what's going on rather than trying to alter it. As a chiropractor, I always take the natural approach that your body has the wisdom and your body knows what to do. And so, looking at it from that perspective, you start to look at, well, gee, if my body's not producing this hormone, why do I want to be giving my body this hormone from an exogenous place? I really don't want to be. What I want to be doing is I want to be balancing that with the other changes that are going on with my body, and letting nature determine exactly where it needs to go. So one of the things that I really found in there when I started doing some of the research was that we have so many other exogenous places where we get estrogen. It's not really a lack of estrogen that our body is is having the symptoms about. It's really the ratio between progesterone and estrogen and all the other hormones and everything else going on there. When we start going through perimenopause, our progesterone levels just like totally bottom out. So there's still estrogen, but there's not as much progesterone, and it's more about the ratio. And when we can start doing things like getting the exogenous estrogen out of our system, and a lot of that means not eating so much animal products that have naturally occurring estrogen, even the organic ones that people don't realize, you know, and putting in a little bit more soy, which helps balance some of the precursors, and doing a few other things herbally,
Yeah.
that helps to start shifting the balance to a more natural state.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And we are very similar in what we do. And when we spoke last week, we talked about the medicalizing of lifestyle issues, and that these, how we have been leading our lives for the past 10, 20, 30 years have all led us to this state. And now in perimenopause, the body is really speaking out,
Right.
so to
Yeah.
speak, that something is, pay attention to me, something is not working. And I just want to put it out there. I am not a doctor. I am not opposed to any of this. Leslie and I are just providing information, because even if you are on HRT, there's so many other things that the body needs to be supported so that you can thrive through the next 20, 30, 40 years and make your second half of your life even better than the first. So would you say, Leslie, that it's a Band-Aid?
I would. Yeah. And here's another interesting fact that we kind of skipped over, is the fact that if you look around worldwide, the women that have the least symptoms of menopausal problems, you're talking mostly your women in native African cultures and native Asian cultures. You're talking about your women in Southeast Asia, who don't, many of whom speak languages that don't even have an equivalent of the word hot flash.
That is
How does that
fascinating.
figure? Because they're not eating the same diet that we are, and they're getting a ton of healthy antioxidants in there that are helping them to make the right amount of the right chemicals, so that their bodies naturally go through the process without all the problems that we're
Yeah.
having.
It's interesting that you talk about Southeast Asia, because I incorporate yoga's wellness science called Ayurveda, which originated in India. And it's very much about aligning with nature's rhythms. So the rhythms of the day and the night, the rhythms of the month, the rhythms of the seasons. And we are really shifting the season of our life as we go from more fiery, like raising our families and in the midst, of the biggest part of our career, into this other season. So there's like this acceptance. And I think for those other cultures, elders are revered. And so there's so much psychological baggage that comes with perimenopause for women, especially, I would say, especially in the West, and, especially in the US and in Canada, that we're getting old, and that there's really nothing. It's changing, of course, but there's this like, oh my God, my life is over. So I think that just contributes to all of these terrible effects, because of that stress and anxiety. So
Exactly.
that's fascinating about and that there's no word there's no word for it. For a hot flash, but they have the word for menopause, so they know about the ceasing of,
Yeah.
obviously they know about the ceasing of the periods. So people have been emailing me, they're like, how can I see this, how are you debunking these myths? So I think the first one that you talked about was that bioidentical versus regular, that there really aren't many studies that actually prove that. So what are some other myths around HRT?
Well, one of the biggest ones, and this actually came out since, I've been through my own experience. There was a huge study that was put out by by some practitioners in the UK, where they studied over 100,000 women. And first of all, like I said, the assumption that bioidenticals are safer. Side by side studies do not pretty much definitively proven now, do not show that in terms of things like breast cancer, which is the primary issue with HRT to begin with. That's one of the big reasons why the medical establishment has backed off the HRT to the extent that they have, which has not been enough, because we still see millions of women getting, coming down with breast cancer due to the HRT. Now, it's hard to say that it's only because of the HRT, but there is significant concern there.
Thank you. I hear from some women that are saying that their doctors are telling them that it's a direct contradiction, that there is not an increased rate, and I see your eyes, and they're very strongly saying this is not what my doctor says. Like, I feel so much better, and I appreciate that they feel so much better, but there's so much conflicting information even from in the medical community. Is that typical?
I think it's a lot more typical than we want to admit.
Yeah.
Medical doctors now understand their hearts are in the right place.
Yes, of course.
But they don't have the time or the inclination or the energy to possibly keep up on the thousands and thousands of studies that come out all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So what do they rely on? They rely on what they get from many of the same resources that we do.
Yeah.
The media, their drug reps, like there's no vested interest in there, and I hate to sound cynical about it, but the drug reps are the ones that are to a large extent educating them, paying for keeping the prices of their continuing education low by by sponsoring their seminars, things of that nature. So there's they don't get an unbiased view.
It's so interesting. And this has been a few years since I've heard this, but like it takes 15 years for for some of the new studies to actually get to the medical establishment before it's known. And especially for the doctors that have been practicing, I found that a lot of them don't want to change. It's like they're kind of just want to keep doing what they've been doing, but obviously things have changed. With everything. I mean, my background's in yoga and in injuries, and 30, 40 years ago, if you had a back injury, you were supposed to not do anything for weeks and just stay in bed. And like, that's known that like, you would never want to do that. The body has to, so things are still changing. And what's so overwhelming, and one of the things I like, you could go down a Google rabbit hole 4 hours a night for a year, getting so much conflicting information. So for women who are trying to figure it out on their own, and I just got a message from somebody, it's just, I'm getting really, really bad hot flashes. I'm trying to research it. And I love that women are joining my group to get this information. And this is one of the wonderful things about the internet. But I wrote an email a couple months ago. And so just for fun, I Googled like how to, help menopausal symptoms, and 23 million things. So
yeah.
So it's so overwhelming. And of course, some of that is going to be conflicting. And I think just as we wrap up, just to simplify it, it's that your body knows what to do. And if something is out of balance, we can't just treat it with, and hormones are a pill. Even though your body is making it already, it still is a pill, and it's not treating the underlying symptoms. And there's so much more to even more than, what we're taking in and our lifestyles. It's how we feel about ourselves, how we choose to take care of ourselves, because all of that is going to be reflected in our health. And we have to learn to put ourselves first. And this is a really, really hard thing for women to do. And because we've been raising children and putting everybody else before ourselves. So as we get to this age, it's like the messages are getting louder, like, please take care of me. And
Mhm.
women, once they understand, like, they're going to be a better parent, like you say. I mean, a lot of women also joke, I want to kill my husband. You said you wanted to kill your teenagers. Like, of course, obviously it's said in jest, but there's going to be some issues if there's all that anger around. So
Yeah.
obviously, if you take care of yourself, those relationships are going to be better. Everything is going to be better, but it means putting yourself first, raising your hand for help, taking somebody's hand that reaches it, and having the accountability and the resources that you need, and being surrounded by a group of women who, instead of sitting around and complaining, which happens a lot because we've normalized hot flashes, for example, saying, no, this is not normal. It's common, but this does not mean that it's normal. These are not normal
Right.
symptoms. The women's in Southeast Asia are not, they don't have a word for hot flashes. Like, this is not
Hmm.
normal.
Yeah.
So some final words from you, Leslie, just about when a woman is suffering and wants to go the natural route, but doesn't really have any hope around it. How can you help women say, there is hope, and if you want to avoid this, you can, or if you want to get off of them, you can? What would you say to them?
So I think the thing that I would say is it does have to be a total approach, putting your health and well-being first, which oftentimes is going to mean changes in some of the foods that you eat, rebalancing your gut microbiome, doing a lot of other things that that it's obviously too much in depth to go into.
Right.
And and if I can put a quick plug, if people want more info, they can get info in more info in my group,
Uh-huh.
which has a very similar name to yours, interestingly
It
enough.
does. It does. We love that. We love that word vibrant. We love that
Yeah,
word
yeah,
vibrant. And
yeah.
it's
So
it's really good.
is
Yeah.
it okay if I let them know what the name of my group?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So my group is Vibrant Health Over 40.
Uh-huh. Okay, great.
And I do address more than, basically my whole concept is more about a natural way, you know, women 40 and beyond, whatever their health issue happens to be. So there is some perimenopause in there, but I've kind of expanded it at this point.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you for the
Yeah.
work that you do. Your
Yeah.
background is just fascinating, that you brought this scientific approach. And I think that's very different. Sorry, go ahead.
I do want to also say, because you have been referring to me as Dr. Leslie, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a chiropractor.
Yes.
I don't do medical diagnosis. I've shifted into health coaching and consulting. So I don't want to give any misconceptions. Um, I do very much help people work with their doctors to get off meds if that's something they choose to do, and their
Oh.
doctor is supportive of that. But I'm very careful about how I walk that line.
No, I appreciate that. And, I always called my chiropractors, they like to go by their first name,
Right.
doctor's
Yeah.
first name.
Yeah.
So that's what I was causing you. But I appreciate you defining that. And, and I love this idea that people are partnering with health coaches and their doctors, because the doctors
Exactly.
don't have the time to
Yeah.
go into all this lifestyle stuff.
Yeah.
So,
They absolutely don't.
yeah.
And now that I'm quote unquote retired, and I moved from having an office and seeing lots of people a day into just holding those few people accountable, I really see the difference as to the kind of difference it can make when people have that coach and that accountability. So
Wonderful. Well, thank you for all you do, helping women heal. And that's how we're going to change the world, right?
and thank you too for all that you do.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. It's been really a pleasure.
Okay, thanks.